Welcome everyone. Welcome to Learn from the Pros. We will get started in just a couple minutes. Let everyone join.
For those of you who are just joining, we're going to give it another minute just to let people end their final calls and jump on. So we'll get going in a second. Alrighty. So we'll let people join in. I'll kick it off. Hi, everyone. I am Kelsey DuPont. I am here with Daxco. I am so excited that you guys have joined our session today on streamlining program management processes in preparation for summer camp. So today during our session, we're going to discuss ways to help you decrease inefficiencies around program management, increase revenue source from camp, and really drive engagement with your members through PlayerSpace. So as you can see, we have a few panelists here. We are going to hear from our PlayerSpace pros to see how they've heightened their mission and what they've learned from last year going into this year. But before we jump in, I know people are still joining. Welcome. Just a few housekeeping tidbits. All participants have been muted to cut down on background noise, but we do want this to be super interactive. So when we're going through questions and our panelists are talking about their experiences or tips and tricks, feel free to chat in any of your questions. And if we don't get to them right away, we'll be sure to get to them at the end. So with that said, looks like we have a good group of people here. Chris, I will pass it off to you to introduce yourself and the panelists, and we can get going.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kelsey. So most of y'all on the call, just looking through the attendees that have joined so far, most of y'all know me. I'm Chris Capone. I've been with PlayerSpace since its inception in various roles. Probably spoke to a lot of you on the phone personally, actually, over the years. And we're really excited to bring back the Learn from the Pros webinar series. We took a little bit of a hiatus in 2020. As you know, a lot happened in 2020. So we took a little bit of a break, but we're starting off the new year with this first installment of Learn from the Pros. And we're doing it a little bit differently this year. And I'll talk about that as we dive in. But real quick, I just wanted to introduce, we have two panelists that are joining us today. We have Melanie Zuniga at the Pikes Peak YMCA, and we have Rachel Kafsky at the YMCA of Gaston County in North Carolina. Melanie, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself to the group, and then Rachel after Melanie before we get going?
Sure, sounds good. Hey everybody, I'm the Executive Director of Youth Development for YMCA of the Pikes Peak region in Colorado Springs. And I started with the Y as a day camp counselor many moons ago, and just kind of loved day camp. I live and breathe day camp, but I also now do a little bit of before and after school and stuff like that too.
Cool.
Rachel.
Awesome. I'm Rachel Kafsky. I also got into the Y ages ago as a teenager. I was a counselor and a lifeguard and all those things that you kind of do as part-time gigs, and then found my way back to it as a parent of young kids because I was home with a 2- and 4-year-old all day and I needed to talk to adults, and the Y ended up being a great part-time place to do that. And then it morphed into more of a career. So now I'm the Associate Executive Director for the Warlick branch, but really do, I would say generally like the program strategy for the association over here in Gaston County.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. So I mentioned when I kicked it off that we're doing it a little bit differently this year. So like a lot of the folks that are on the call today, if you've attended previous Learn from the Pros webcasts that we've done in the past, we used to spend a lot of time talking about new features and functionality on PlayerSpace and our various modules, and we'll definitely do that this year in future webcasts. But in light of all that's transpired over the course of the last 12 months across the country, and the world for that matter, we wanted to go about this one a little bit differently and really approach it more so from the standpoint of thought leadership, right? Like we wanted to bring Melanie and Rachel onto the call to talk about ways in which their associations have pivoted and how they've had to change their operations and the way in which they use not just technology, but the way they run their programs as a result of all the changes that have occurred, in the last 12 months. So, really, when we talk about camp, because obviously this is a camp space, Learn from the Pros, we talk about camp, we know that, your camps are a vital thread to the, connecting your community. And we know that that's more important than ever. And so really, and I'll just open it up, we'll keep it real informal. I'll open it up to the both of you. Can y'all share, some of the ways in which in 2020, your respective Ys had to pivot and react and face those challenges that COVID brought in 2020 associated with summer camps? Either one of y'all. Yeah, you're both muted.
Sure. We're just pointing at each other. So in Gaston County, of course, we were shut down initially for a few months and got into a little bit of the realm of, or started to get into the realm of emergency childcare for essential workers, and then kind of went from that into our summer camp operation. And what we ended up doing was consolidating from 4 different sites into one specific site that then we just managed the heck out of to make sure that we had as little group cross-contamination as humanly possible, and really programmed out to the nth degree where everyone would be at any given time. So, I mean, that's a super nutshell of how we managed camp, but we just streamlined everything into one main hub and went from there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we talk to Ys every day, and we've kind of heard similar things. But we have a lot of folks on the call that are from associations that really struggled in 2020 trying to figure out how to face those challenges. So, Melanie, how about in Pikes Peak? Can you share with the group some of the challenges that y'all faced as a result of the pandemic last year, and what you had to do in terms of pivoting and facing those challenges from more like an organizational standpoint?
Yeah, for sure. I think that obviously we went into essential childcare basically the day that everything shut down, and we were first looking at it as like it's just 2 weeks of spring break, no big deal. And the next thing we know, it's summer. So we ran essential childcare at 2 locations, and then kind of planned to relaunch summer camp as normal as we could. So we did run, I think we ran 5 camps off the top of my head, but we tried to do all of our camps off site and not within a YMCA building, so that we were able to utilize the space at the Y for the members, since we were down to such small numbers, right? And then we went off site for camp so that we could have enough space for our campers too, and we weren't putting anybody kind of out or limiting even further. We also had some brainstorming ideas around like utilizing other departments and how can we kind of beef up what turned out to be the longest summer ever, or whatever you want to call it. So our sports and aquatics departments came in and ran some really cool activities that like we wouldn't normally think of with our kids. Our kids were throwing pretending to be lifeguards and throwing the tube and all that kind of stuff, and learning rescues in the gym. So that was really cool. We also had, our resident camp didn't run. So we were able to have the resident camp guys come down to day camp and run some really cool stuff that our day campers don't normally get to do, like archery and rock climbing and that kind of stuff. Cause summer really was kind of, we called it a summer like no other, right? Like basically not having field trips, not being able to swim, lots of things like that. So just really kind of pivoting to figure out how we could still have a good time while also following 8 million rules.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right? Like, it's funny because you said in the beginning, you said, yeah, we thought it was just going to be like a 2-week hiatus, and then we get back to normal. And I think that's what everybody thought. I know that's what we thought at PlayerSpace. We figured, this might last a month, and then it just, of course, it still hasn't ended in some respects, right? So, really, and that was mid to late March. Right. So if you think about that from the standpoint of planning and how much planning goes into summer camps at the YMCA Association, y'all really only had maybe 2.5 months to pivot and make those changes where you could. So those were both great, great tips and tricks. We're not tricks, but great advice and great stories in terms of how y'all face those challenges. And, in light of that, because we know now that the world is going to look different this year, probably in the summer season again. How do y'all plan on capitalizing on those experiences that you went through in 2020 for this summer, right? Because we know it's going to be different. And so what are y'all doing, or how do you plan on capitalizing on those learnings from last year for this year so that you're ahead of the game?
I'll go first, Rachel, if that's cool with you this time. I think a couple of things that we're really thinking about and talking about a lot is options. Work has changed for a lot of people. And so I think summer day camp most of the time is 80% childcare, even though we hate that word, right? Our kids come all summer long. So really looking at half day options, couple days a week options, because so many people are working from home or their jobs have changed and not everybody's needing that traditional 5-day a week care. Also just fun. What is fun? How can you have fun? How do you mix it up and make it different, even if it feels like Groundhog Day because you're in the same gym, for months or whatever. And then cost. I think cost is something else that we talk a lot about, just how do we make it affordable when we know families are dealing with so many things, and just, yeah. And then also bringing those departments back in. I think we all loved that so much, just getting the kids being able to see different faces and learning different things, and obviously making sure that it lines up with all the rules of who you can and can't hang out with, but really utilizing our resources within the Y as well.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. That y'all brought in, we're able to leverage some of the resources from other departments, right? You're able to bring in some of the sports directors and aquatic directors, maybe in ways in which you hadn't thought or never had before, right? Because at the end of the day, it's also just good exposure to those other program directors for those kids. Maybe you had summer camp participants that have never played in a YMCA sports league or a swim lesson, and maybe that experience will lend itself to them trying those programs out. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think one of our biggest learnings in this, and I don't know if anybody else had the same experience, but we found that the kids were really adaptable to what was expected, way more so than anyone else. We kind of wrung our hands about how our kids going to wear masks. They wear them all the time. I mean, it is just not a thing like we thought it would be. And so I think, we were so concerned going in about how we were going to manage these kids and all these new expectations, and they've really been fantastic. So I think that was a nice kind of aha at how really receptive the kids were to what they needed to do to be in the program. And I think this year especially, parents have seemed to also be very okay with everything that we've needed to do. And I don't know if it's just a little bit of a culture shift in that everyone seems a little more grateful about how we're offering programs and what we're doing, because it is really challenging to meet all the needs and try to keep everyone as safe as possible. And we're of course in the after school realm right now, and I don't know what the situation is with everyone else, but our kids do a hybrid in Gaston County. So they go to school 2 days a week. And then the rest of their time is virtual, and half of them go on Mondays and Tuesdays, and the other half go on Thursdays and Fridays. And then everybody's out on Wednesdays. And so our staff are not only doing like full day programming with them. And I realize this isn't summer camp, I'm talking about after school right now, but
a lot of crossover.
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover. And so, our staff are helping them with their logons and helping them with their virtual learning. And we're doing that in addition to all the other kind of enrichment programs. And just really, I think parents have had a new appreciation for what we're doing to offer programming to their kids. And they're generally really grateful for what we're doing. So that has been a really nice change, because I know that program directors, happy parents aren't really talking to you every day. It's only the 5 people that are really mad at you that day. And so you're generally, the feedback that you're getting is just why you hate kids. So that's been a really nice thing that has come out of this. And I think the other piece that we have done intentionally, probably better than we've done in the past, is really communicating with our parents all the time about everything that we're doing. And that has also gone over well, and has been something that parents have really appreciated. So I think those are kind of our biggest things that we struggled with having leadership that wanted our ratios to be bigger, generally speaking, than they are in this time of COVID. And so now that we've had really small groups that our staff are managing, the behavior issues are they're not non-existent, but they're so much better than they were. And so the actual quality of what we're producing is better. And I think it's been great from a middle management standpoint to be able to kind of go, look at how much better it is when we are able to shrink some of those ratios. So
that's really interesting. Yeah. And I think so what I heard you just say is that one of the changes that y'all had to make was that from a when you say ratio, I think staff to child perspective, right? We needed to condense that a little bit and get those ratios a little bit smaller. And what I heard you say as a result is that I guess I'm assuming because the child is getting so much more one-on-one attention, that those behavioral issues have decreased as a result, which leads kind of really nicely into our next question for the webcast, which is, we've talked about how the Y responded to the challenges in 2020. We've talked about how your Ys have, how you're planning on capitalizing on those learnings from 2020 into 2021. Can y'all talk to, and that would be an example of one, obviously, but can y'all talk to other just processes that you've had to develop, right, to streamline all of these, or to create efficiencies at your Ys, right? Given that you might be short-staffed, or maybe it's leveraging technology. It might not always be technology, but what are some of the things that y'all have done from a process standpoint, where you're really looking to streamline things based on this new normal?
Well, one of the things that we have done that I think has also been really successful is in our staffing models. We have this year, we have really worked to bring on people that would stay in a specific within a specific assignment with specific age groups, and have kind of bulked up those teams a little bit, so that when people are going out with COVID, because like I think last week or 2 weeks ago, we had 6 staff that were out either from testing positive or from a known exposure. And so being able to build out a bench in a way that allows you to sub in staff that are only scheduled to certain huddles, at certain times, that is something that I think we probably will maintain going forward, which is, I guess I wouldn't maybe call it an efficiency in the hiring and the setting up of that, but in the execution of it, it makes the days run considerably smoother when we have a little bit of a well of people that we know can kind of plug in, like we kind of call them ninjas, right? Like you can plug them in these areas, and we've got enough of that. And our camp director has done a really good job of really putting that puzzle together. So I think that's something that we have done that will allow us to be more efficient down the line. I don't know if that makes any sense. It makes sense in my head.
No, I get it. I think it makes sense to the group that we have on the call. I think everybody is very much entrenched in the camp childcare world, or at least getting ready for that onslaught, if you will, right? Like from February to June, it's just like a runaway train in camp preparation. So I think everybody gets it. How about you, Melanie, over in Pikes Peak? Any processes that y'all have developed that you've done in order to streamline or create more efficiencies, maybe given the fact that you might have less staff or just less resources available to you?
Yeah, so I think along the staffing line, a couple of things that we've done is we hired more full-time staff recently, just because that availability of being able to help out when schools close or, things happen, quarantines, all the things that have been happening recently. And that's been very beneficial. And they're, assigned to a region, so they know when school closed, they go to a certain Y, and then they're at their school sites doing their thing too. And that's also really helped us kind of get ahead of all of this, as far as having plans for things for kids to do for when they do come to the Y, because we're in, I think, over 10 different school districts. So
right.
We'll get a big mix of kids when they come to us, and they all have online learning at different times, or, different things like that. So just making sure we're prepared. We also, this summer, I've always been a fan of the 10-hour, 4-day on, 1-day off camp schedule for camp staff. And this summer we went to a half-day shift, so that they were with one counselor until noon, and then another counselor came in, and then that kept them only being exposed to 2 adults, right, throughout the day. And I think I love it. It's really been awesome to just see how better the relationship is, counselor to kiddo, and then also how not stressed out they are, like getting to go home or at noon, or come in at noon and sleep late if you're one of those people. Really worked out well. And I think that's something that we'll continue to do moving forward. Yeah, so those two.
Melanie, we do that too, to your point of like kind of having an AM team and a PM team, and it's the same every day. And it's that group of kids, morning counselor and afternoon counselor. And you're right, we see a ton of benefit from it, because also things don't get lost in translation, because if it, with constantly rotating staff on that, because I also, like you, I was a big fan of like 10-hour days, 4 days a week. And then, you tag the next crew in. And we've done this model that you're explaining for a few years. And I'm with you. Like, I think it's a really good, staff are fresh. They're less exhausted. The relationships are better. Things are better communicated to parents. They just don't fall through the cracks of a million hands. And I'm just saying to you, yes, yes, I totally agree.
Yeah. And I think the only other thing, or two things that I kind of have on my brain, is calling things the same thing, you know, like, because in my brain, a school out day is different than a snow day, which is different than a virtual learning day, which is different than summer camp or winter break camp. And so just really trying to nail down like what it is we're doing so that a parent's not like, well, this Monday's a school out day, but next Monday's a virtual learning day. So trying to figure that out. And then the last one is just that parent communication piece. Like, how do we get the info we need from parents to be able to be successful with their kiddos? And I think that's primarily with like virtual learning, right? Like, I need all 20 of your kids' logins for Seesaw, Schoology, da 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 da. So we created a Google form and really try to just keep it all in one place where all our staff can find it, versus like parents writing on stickies when they drop off and all that kind of thing. So
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot to manage. And I don't know if you saw when I pointed at the screen when you said just one of the things, because it's so simple. When you said that we're trying to be a lot more diligent in terms of standardizing our naming conventions for what we call things. It just really resonates, because I mean, we obviously with PlayerSpace, we work with YMCAs all across the country, and even within the same association, branch to branch, sometimes programs are called different things. And I think if you put everything through the lens of member experience, which I think member experience in 2021, is more important than it's ever been, especially as the Y is looking to bring back a lot of those members that have been on pause. So even little things like that, I think, go a really long way. I think that's great. And in that same light, right? So when we talk about processes for efficiencies, with regards to, because we're a software company. So like with regards to PlayerSpace, I mean, everybody on the call knows PlayerSpace. Most of y'all use PlayerSpace for your programs in some respects. A lot of camp childcare customers on the call today. But can any of y'all speak to any like tips or tricks that you've been able to experience or using camp space or in care that have sort of made it a little bit easier for y'all to manage in a time like with a lot less interaction with the families, whether that's, I mean, that could be online forms, the online collection of forms and health histories through through camp space. It could be the communication system. I think Rachel, y'all have been on the system a little bit longer than Melanie's team has. But any sort of, tips or tricks that y'all have been able to use camp space or in care for these programs that you can share with the group?
Yeah. So one of the things that we did last summer, we were in a very condensed time frame to get all of our staff trained, of course, prior to summer, and to kind of get everything kind of checked in terms of a risk standpoint, to make sure that everyone had met the most basic requirements. And so we took a hard look at our trainings and said, what are some of these things that we could turn into slideshows or videos and let staff do on their own time? And then I worked with Angie, PlayerSpace. She's like, I know she probably rolls her eyes every time I call her, because I feel like I call her a million times a day, but I worked with her to say, we want to turn these into video presentations or slideshow presentations, and we want to make this a quiz, and staff can do this on their own time so that they can do it at home. I don't care if they're laying in their bed, going through the trainings, but that they're doing it, taking the quiz and logging it. So we actually turned that into a similar process for like volunteer coaches or volunteers. And so we put all the staff in the risk management module of the PlayerSpace system. And then we assigned them prerequisites. And so on their own time, they could go through and complete their video watching for child abuse prevention. They could go through all the emergency procedures. They could take the quizzes. And then we had a log of everyone who had done it. And they uploaded all their things when it was done. And so that was a great way to sort of take the most advantage of the time we had with staff, and then allowed them on their own time to get those trainings done that could be done on their own time. So that was great. The other thing that we took advantage of for the first time was we built out that activity scheduler, hour by hour, huddle by huddle. And it was a beast on the front end to do, right? I mean, the first time you're building that out, I mean, it was a lot, but it was great throughout the summer, because when we would email out to parents, we just always included links of what, the deep schedule link and all those things, so that parents could click and see that their child, because parents only see the most chaotic time of day. They only see drop off, they only see pickup. It's organized chaos on purpose, right? Like, it looks a little nutty. Those that we know it's fine, but that's the only thing that parents see. And so when they were just kind of getting regular reinforcement of like, this is what my child's schedule looks like today, and it was basic, it didn't go into like extreme detail, but I could go in and see that my kid had environmental science that day, and so then when they're getting in the car, they can at least talk about some of what they did during those block schedules. So it gave parents an opportunity to connect with kids, and it looked like and we did have our act together, but it presents like you really have your act together, which I think is sometimes half the battle with parents, is that as long as you can project polished and organized, then it goes a long way for them to believe that you are in fact mostly polished and mostly organized. So that was a super helpful feature. And then we always use the text message and email feature if we have to change rides out locations because of inclement weather, being able to send something to people's cell phones to say, we've moved the rides out location because of inclement weather. Check your emails for maps if you're unfamiliar. We're able to cut down on so much confusion that we've had in previous years if we have to change something because, it's thundering and lightning, and so we have to move things around. Parents were very much on top of where we were going. So those were probably the three biggest, most useful features that we used. So I mean, don't get me wrong, like, it's a ton of work on the front end, but if you've got somebody that you can just, kind of sit alone in a room and have them nail it out, then it's really helpful for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think that you talked about schedules, which is, to your point, we've got different types of scheduling tools in CampSpace, and some of our customers will get very granular, and they'll tell you hour by hour what the child's doing, and some of them keep it more broad, like you described. But I think that one of the things that was interesting that you mentioned, because it's obvious, like, one of the cool things of CampSpace and InCare, for that matter, is you can email and text, you can send newsletters. But what I thought was interesting that you said, Rachel, was when you talked about the way in which y'all have used prerequisites, because I think most folks on the call today know that one of the cool things with CampSpace and InCare is that you can collect electronic forms and waivers in health history and like emergency contact information on parents and for the campers, so that you can use the check-in and check-out app and have all that access. But one of the things that you pointed out that is a very creative way to use that tool in a way in which we're constantly educating our customers on is using prerequisites on staff, right? Because to your point, like, these are trainings and pieces of information that we've traditionally had to collect on our staff members, and we need to make sure that they're up to date and they haven't expired. And being able to set that up in our system and be able to police all that without having to do that offline is something that is very much possible, and not enough customers, I think, even know that they can do that. So I really appreciate that tip. Melanie, how about y'all? I know that Gaston County, I know Rachel's organization, they've been on the system a little bit longer. So it might not even necessarily be something that you've already learned as a tip, but maybe some ways in which both of y'all are planning to use the system in 2021.
Yeah, I'm glad Rachel talked about those things, because like the activity schedule is like my next adventure of like trying to figure out. We went with Camp Space like literally right before summer started, so it was like hurry up and figure this out because you're showing up tomorrow, you know, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So we didn't really dig too deep into that, but I think some of the things that we love and we're going to continue and like dig deeper into are the templates that you can create in with your emails and stuff, you know, having your snow day template ready to go. So at 5 a.m. you can just kick it out is life changing, right? Like you don't have to stress about it. You don't have to pull an Excel spreadsheet from Daxco and then import it somewhere else. Like it's all just done. We absolutely love that. I think the check-in and out, like when you can actually see the parents on the little dee, 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 you know, like, you know, when you check ID that if they're showing up there, that they're allowed to take their kid because they're one of the emergency contacts, right? So I think that makes it a lot better than a binder or a spreadsheet or any of the things that a lot of us have done in the past. And then our parents aren't super awesome at like knowing that they can just go there and update stuff. But I think that's a game changer too, right? Like if they need to add an emergency contact, it's super easy and they don't have to call the office and send us a fax signed that they can, you know, add someone. They can just do it themselves. So I think education as far as like user stuff is for us going to be a game changer moving forward. But all of those things I think are super beneficial. And of course the online forms, you know, we were doing a Q&A in Daxco before, and then when you import that, it just gets kind of funky and hard to read to some extent. And then having them all in one place, it's easy to see if your parents have done them all or not. You can kick a reminder real quick. That's been super awesome for us too. And we've been acing our license inspections because our staff actually know where to find everything. You know what I mean? Versus like click here in Daxco, then you have to go to DocuWare to pull their shot record. And then, so that's been awesome for us too.
That last piece makes me really happy. You know, we are, you know, PlayerSpace, you know, one of the things that we've always done, and we continue this now being a part of Daxco is and obviously less in 2020, but we try to do site visits as much as possible. And I can remember doing summer camp site visits in like 2018, 2019, when we were first launching Camp Space, before we had, you know, online forms completely rolled out. And I literally watched fines happening on site from licensing. Won't name the YMCAs, but I saw it happen. And we said there's got to be a better way. So, you know, when you can kind of translate, because it's cool to be able to say, yeah, we can do online forms, but it's cool to be able to hear like a real life example of we're not paying fines to licensing anymore, right? We're prepared for that. That's really, really cool. It's a great story. And so really like we've got one last question, and then we're probably going to open up for a little bit of QA for the group, because I know they've been typing questions in, and that's just really, you know, and y'all have both kind of spoken to it a little bit today, which is, you know, all YMCAs across the country right now are operating on just slimmer staff. And so what are some things to consider in terms of communication, like ways in which YMCAs can improve their communication with parents in terms of summer camp programs? That could be through our software, it could be something externally that y'all have done, but what are some like communication tips that you would say that every Y should know about or follow with camp, especially this year?
Ooh, that every Y should follow.
or just things that have been useful for y'all in terms of ways in which you communicate with your parents.
So not this past summer, but the previous summer, we sort of established for every camp that we ran. So we had a traditional day camp, we had a preschool based camp, and then we had specialty camps that were more along, like the arts and sciences and like robotics and cooking and things like that, and then sports based camps. And so for each of those camps, we did a blog, basically a blog, right? We had one separately for each camp, and then we would include that link into every email that we sent to parents, that they could click to see photos, to get to find out like what we were doing that week. And then we did hold the director's feet to the fire on, you have to send out a Monday morning welcome to everyone about what's going on this week and what parents can expect. You have to post a midweek blip about something with pictures of kids in action, and then you have to do an end of the week wrap up. But sending that, we just linked it through the PlayerSpace emails that went out, and then sending that, you could see how many people were clicking it. Parents were totally keeping up with what was happening. We could load it in real time. So, and kind of going back to that piece of parents just don't see the meat of the day. And so if you can provide them with photos of like kids in action and doing really fun and engaging things, then we found that it cuts way down on things like, well, they never let me fill up my water bottle all day, or, like whatever the things are that people say, because they had real true like evidence of kids engaged in activities. And so, the kid who gets in the car and they say, what'd you do today? And they say, nothing. They can take that with a grain of salt, because it's pretty clear that there were lots of kids doing lots of stuff that day. And so that is definitely, it's successful. Though certainly you want to make sure that the person who's doing it has the right writing skills. And we all know that like not everyone is a whiz at that. So, finding a person who can just pull together some well-typed, grammatically correct, blurbs and send them out. But to me, I think it's worth even paying a part-time person to do that, because it's so important, I think, to the quality of your program. So having a way that they could constantly see what was going on was really helpful for us.
Awesome. Melanie, how about y'all?
I think the biggest thing that we've kind of shifted our culture from when I first came to Pikes Peak is just the phone call now versus waiting till pickup. It's hard in the middle of a camp day to make a phone call sometimes, but it goes a million miles with a parent versus like, I'm going to bust you at pickup when you're trying to get home and cook dinner with something that happened way earlier in the day. So we've been really intentional about picking up the phone. Also, I think like for us, the newsletter and all that stuff has been a program director responsibility in the past, and really figuring out like, because you can give access to anybody in PlayerSpace, right? Like, so can our camp directors put in the meat of the newsletter so the PD's not having to go talk to the camp director and then put it in the PlayerSpace to set up the template? So really just kind of streamlining that process. And then I think there's even some really cool stuff that you could do with like counselor of your kids group communication to parents. I haven't ventured there yet because I'm super scared, obviously, of letting an 18-year-old counselor say something to a parent. But I think if we set it up right and had the templates done right, there could be some really cool connections there for in the future. So.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that there's a lot of really creative ways in which you can not just utilize newsletters and then the emailing, text messaging functionality, but even things like sharing media, right? Like sharing pictures with camp families. That was something that we heard a lot from customers in 2019 that we built some really cool tools for in 2020. with anticipation, and then a lot of camps didn't happen. So maybe 2021. But I totally agree, right? Because every time we talk to a customer, and we ask them, what are your pain points, or what are some of the things that y'all struggle with as a childcare and camp staff? If communication is not the first thing on the list, it's usually the second. And so it's cool to hear some real life ways in which you've utilized CampSpace and in-care to improve communication. And even just sometimes it's not every problem in the world, even though we're a tech company and we like to think that software solves every problem. Sometimes it's as simple as just being better about picking up the phone and calling a parent when things happen. I think those are all great tips when you're focused on how do we improve communication for our families. So that really concludes the webcast. Those were we talked through all the different questions that we wanted to get both of y'all's expert opinion on for the group today. We've got some time, and usually what we'll do now is we'll leave the webcast open for a few minutes and just allow for some QA. So if you're on the call and you've got questions, they could be about PlayerSpace, they could be about you might have a follow-up question to something that Melanie or Rachel said that you want some clarification on in terms of what they do with their why and how that might be useful at your why. If you have any questions, there's a questions icon on the Zoom window. So if you type those questions in, we can definitely get those answered for you here for the next few minutes. And of course, if not, feel free to drop off and you'll receive a recording of this.
We have one question for the panelists. What's one thing you all are most excited about? I know that we're focused on ways that we've had to pivot, but what's one thing you're most excited about in this upcoming summer season?
I can tell you that we are anticipating that we will go a little bit more back to quote unquote normal in the way that we have offered our programs before, in terms of not doing everything at one centralized location, but being able to offer different options at different locations. And so that's just, I think, getting back to, there will be a million accommodations, right? But being able to kind of get back to a more traditional camp experience, I think, is probably what our folks are most excited about.
I'm super pumped for themes and just like the creativity. I think my staff have really learned how to like take it to the next level as far as like activities and theming and stuff goes. So I'm excited to see kind of what we come up with and what our big events look like on Fridays, and how they really take that theme, since they haven't relied on swimming and field trips and all that stuff. So I'm super pumped just to see what they come up with. And I like to plan too, but sometimes they tell me to get out and mind my own business. So we'll see.
We did get a question about if this will be recorded. Yes, it will be recorded. So we'll send this out as a follow-up. We had a note here from Amy who said, and I'm sure you guys are feeling the same way, is hoping for new faces in enrollment and staffing. Do you guys see a potential to reach even more campers in this summer, given all the changes?
Yeah, I think there's a different crew needing care to some extent. I think, jobs changing and that kind of stuff. And then I think for me, like, always trying to make the why not just be like summer childcare, but like why it's the coolest place for your kid for the summer. And if we can get that message across, then of course we'll have new and different people.
Yeah, I think it would be great to, really reach into different communities that we have not served yet. I really feel like we'll probably as we're coming out of this, I think the people who are with the Y right now are the people who really, really trust the Y. And I think we have a really good reputation in the community, but I'll be interested to see how many new faces we get on the heels of how we've conducted ourselves through this first part of the pandemic, because certainly I think from a community perspective, I know we've gotten a lot of feedback that they feel like we've been very safe and a safe place for their kids in terms of all of our policies and procedures. And so, you know, I hope we see new faces. So I think it'll be interesting to see who we do attract on the heels of this.
I wanted to just quickly chime in that I'm reading through some of the questions, and I'm seeing some of the messages in the chat function. We actually have 2 upcoming camp space trainings, you know, mass trainings for anybody on the call to attend. And I just dropped the registration link into the chat on Zoom, and we'll also email it out as well to everybody that attended today. But if you look in the chat box for Zoom, there's a link where you can actually sign up for any of the February training sessions that our team is going to be hosting for Camp Space in preparation for 2021.
I think that might be all the questions that we're getting. If you guys have additional questions for Melanie or Rachel, we will for sure send any questions that you guys have their way. So please feel free to email us at marketing@daxco.com. I spoke and then another question came in, so I got distracted by that. So one thing is they asked Chris, how long will the sessions be that you mentioned?
That's a great question. I don't know. I'm assuming they'll be an hour, maybe a little bit longer, and those will be recorded as well, would be my guess. But if you have questions about that, if you follow that link and you sign yourself up, we'll get your contact information in those fields, and we can confirm that with you.
Great. Well, I think that may be everything we have for today. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email us at marketing@daxco.com. We can share that with you. But this email, this recording will be sent as a follow-up next week. So if you have it, you want to share it with your teams, you totally can. We would encourage it because they had some great insight today. But if not, we'll go ahead and call it a day, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.